the highest incidence of gender-based violence and femicide are from the Western Cape, and the highest rate of homelessness that I've seen anywhere. As Action SA, we are saying, give us an opportunity to govern so that we may demonstrate taking services to all residents. And we are not blind to the challenges that the same DA might have faced in the Western Cape. However, the DA as an Action SA government is accountable.
Welcome to the State of the Nation. As you know, we've put a great emphasis on the forthcoming general and provincial elections. We've spoken about it heavily on the channel. And we are going to get into one of the parties that has stirred things up, and it's great to see new alternatives. But before we get into the meat of what we're going to discuss today, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Pace Car Rental, you can get a car rental wherever you are in South Africa. They're the fastest growing, the bravest car rental company, and I know that because they sponsor the State of the Nation. So get their details below and support them. Support us by subscribing to the channel. Joining us today is Action SA's Western Cape Premier candidate, Angela Sobey. Angela, welcome to the State of the Nation.
Thanks so much, Mike.
We've had a number of people here from Action SA. So, it is a party it's obviously almost an old party, but a new party wrapped in one, right?
Yeah, we prefer to be known as the criticism we get from the bigger parties is that we're a small party. We're a new party, not a small party.
But even then, this is South Africa. New means they've only just allowed, they've just arrived last week. But Action SA did contest to a limited degree some of the local government elections,
2021 local government elections,
and did particularly well.
Yes,
right,
we did.
And since then, under very serious management and using resources, Action SA has gone nationwide, and you're standing just about everywhere in this coming election.
Yes.
And you are there to get Action SA on display and available for selection for voters in the Western Cape.
Correct.
Why should voters vote for Action SA in the Western Cape?
The Western Cape is a hotly contested province at this point in time. It used to be a choice basically between the DA and the ANC. So if the ANC wasn't governing, the DA would be governing, and the DA has been in there for the last 15 years. And Action SA, in essence, as on the national platform, is coming into the Western Cape to offer voters a political alternative. We live in a democracy, so as a political party, we've gotten into politics precisely because there are areas that we see aren't working very well, and as a political party, we would like to offer voters the alternative.
Okay, so South Africa is almost like two countries, isn't it? You've got 8 provinces run by the ANC badly, and one province which is distinctly different, that being the Western Cape. So, where the Democratic Alliance has been running it for 15 years, balance the books, get all the clean audits. Cape Town and the Western Cape seems to be the only area that is creating jobs. And yet, you talk about the Western Cape being hotly contested. So the question then is, what would you do as Premier of the Western Cape if you got elected with a majority, let's say? What would you do differently to what the Democratic Alliance is doing?
So having been in the Western Cape since just before my candidate announcement, and having gone through the different areas in the Western Cape, it is evident that service delivery does not reach all areas of the Western Cape. The areas that are well looked after are mostly suburban areas. and the roads are beautiful, it's pristine, it's you cannot fault you cannot fault anybody in those areas. And when you go to the underprivileged areas, it's a different story, and it becomes a combination of issues, Mike. When you look at what is happening in the Western Cape, it is a challenge to any government. And the important thing is that when you're elected into power, be it at a national, provincial, or local level, it's important to understand that you are now accountable to all the residents of the city, province, or the country that you're governing. And what we've seen in other provinces, and I cannot speak because I haven't been in government in the Western Cape so far, so I can only refer to a frame of reference outside of the Western Cape, is that the political parties seem to be playing politics at the expense of the residents. So the Western Cape dynamic is characterized by unemployment, by poverty, by substance abuse, some of the highest levels of substance abuse, by crime, gangsterism. The highest incidents of gender-based violence and femicide are from the Western Cape, and the highest rate of homelessness that I've seen anywhere. So with looking at what one could do differently in the Western Cape, there are massive challenges, because in trying to take services, even refuse removal services are being blocked by extortionist gangs. So there is a huge challenge in the Western Cape, whether it's in terms of housing, creating housing, or refuse removal, or just services. And as Action SA, we believe in a consultative process. And I personally believe that in order to govern any area, it becomes very important that you govern with the people and for the people. You cannot govern by going in there occasionally or letting people only see you every 5 years when you are campaigning for votes. It's important to work with civil society and with residents on the ground to ensure that you are responsive. Residents need to be brought into sub-council meetings so that they can understand what the IDP is, what budget has been allocated, what projects are meant to be taking place in their areas, and so that they can hold the government accountable for those things.
Okay, so we know that the Western Cape is well documented, seems to be the crime capital of South Africa, certain sectors of crime, but yet this is a national competency, right? Now, what we also know is that under the ANC government, especially with Becky Cele as the Minister of Police, he has shrunk the police presence in the Western Cape, right? Obviously, it is to make the opposition not look so good. Do you think you're suddenly going to have a reversal from an ANC government, for example, that suddenly the next police minister is going to say, let's make Action SA look great by bringing in more police to the Western Cape?
If it's an ANC government, we're clearly not expecting that.
So then why should anybody vote for you? Should they not then vote for the ANC, because then they would send more police to the Western Cape?
But the ANC will not send more police to the Western Cape, or they might try and do superficial fixes to make themselves look good.
All I'm saying is you as the Western Cape Premier, right, would encounter exactly the same problems.
Absolutely.
Right, which with the best respect to the people that are in charge, there's very little they can do about the national government refusing to do their bit, right? Because it's a national competency. So I'm saying, is it fair to say to voters, we're going to fix up crime and corruption, when you can't? That refuse truck is still going to get stopped by that crime syndicate because the police won't do anything about the crime problem, right? The murder rate would still be high because the police won't investigate it because they've been denuded in the Western Cape by the national government. So, all I'm saying is that how does Action SA plan on getting this changed, the attitude of national government towards the Western Cape that is not run by the ANC?
It goes back to the point that I made a few minutes ago about political parties playing politics at the expense of the electorate and of South African citizens. In the Western Cape, Mike, it becomes, that's why I said earlier, it becomes important to work with civil society and to work with organizations, with residents on the ground. There are a lot of organizations that are doing what government departments are meant to be doing. If you look just at civil society in general, civil society is in essence doing government's job. But coming to what you were saying about the ANC strategically weakening the police in the Western Cape. As a result, you've got the Western Cape bringing in law enforcement officers and so on. You know, you cannot take away the fact that the DA is trying in the Western Cape. Yes. But that certainly does not make a compelling argument as to why, as Action SA, we should not be contesting in the Western Cape. And what I am saying that, as Action SA, what we might look at doing differently in the Western Cape, besides holding the national government accountable through our provincial and national structures, how I believe you can hold the national government accountable is by letting the same voters know and see what is being done. I believe that as government, we tend to run government at a certain level and not take it to the ground and let the electorate, let the people that voted us into power understand what it is realistically that we are able to do and what we are not able to do and how we could work around it and so on. So accountability is a huge issue. And I believe that in terms of the police presence and so on, that needs to be done a lot more. But it is a comprehensive solution that is required in the Western Cape. It's not just policing. It's understanding the socioeconomic factors that contribute to this. And it's understanding that these issues, the crime, the gender-based violence and femicide, and all these issues that I listed in our chat earlier, that these affect mostly the peripheral areas of the Western Cape, your colored and black communities, who make up 80% of the population of the Western Cape. So as a South African of mixed origin, I am able to walk into a Gugulethu, a Khayelitsha, a Makhasa, you name the township, and go and engage nabantu bakhona ngesiXhosa, and be able to demonstrate an understanding of what is happening on the ground, and be able to go to a Delft, to a Blue Downs, to an Eersterivier, and go and speak to people in Afrikaans. I have gangsters coming up to me in Manenberg and saying, ja, maar auntie, julle politicians bly omkom en dan sien ons julle net elke 5 jaar, maar julle maak nie 'n verskil in ons lewens nie. And I believe that this is where, as a government, a relationship with civil society, collaborative working relationship with civil society and with the residents becomes absolutely critical. Because when you engage gangsters, reformed gangsters, drug addicts, and so on, in collaboration with civil society, who are on the ground doing the job, by the way, you are not reinventing the wheel. You are hearing from the residents and you are hearing from civil society that this is what affects us, this is what we need. And you are able to facilitate and ensure that you bring about actual skills programs that are linked to entrepreneurial programs, so that that addict in recovery that has been clean for however long is able to, or that gangster that has come out of prison that is wanting a second chance in society, that they are able to be put into a skills program to learn a set of skills that could then link to an entrepreneurial program that allows them to start earning a living. When you look at these communities, Mike, it is important to understand the historical context as well, that the bulk of these communities used to be textile workers in the textile industry. until the textile industry was is completely destroyed, which left these people, so many families, homeless and without an income. Similarly with your fishing communities, your fishing quotas have been handed to the highest bidder, and we've got poachers trawling in our waters. So when we talk about a comprehensive suite of solutions, it's important to understand that you cannot deal with addiction in isolation. The incidence of homelessness in the Western Cape is directly linked to addiction, where I go to the ground and I'll sit and talk to addicts, and they'll tell me that we prefer to actually stay in. No, auntie, my family is from Belhar. My family is from Kales River. My family, I come from a good family. But I prefer to be here because I don't have anybody telling me that I cannot use. I don't have anybody telling me, because even the rehabs will have conditions. And I am in conversations with rehab centers to say to them, can we collaborate where, I go and I speak to civil society and we try and get skills programs so that those that are clean for a while are able to learn new skills or able to, even those with skills, because remember, some addicts are graduates. Some addicts are actually very intelligent. A lot of addicts, actually, if not all of them, are highly, highly intelligent beings. And some are academically gifted. A lot of them are artists and so on. And if you work with rehab centers, because the rehab centers know what they're doing. I don't know how to bring people out of addiction. If you work with those rehab centers and you say, look, you guys are doing a great job, but what happens with this addict once they are clean? And this is just an example. I could easily pick a gangster or anyone, So what happens with this addict once they are clean? The job market is already so shrunk that, bless their heart, governing parties in the provinces and nationally are using EPWP programs to claim that they are creating jobs. EPWP is not sustainable because it's a 3 or 6 month program, Mike. And if you talk to people in these communities about EPWP, they will tell you that in a lot of instances, it's at the pleasure of the councillor, who will then tell you, no, go to your DA or go to your ANC, go to your Action SA that you voted for. This is for my people. Now, coming back to addicts, when you say to rehab centers, what then happens? It's a struggle for a recovering addict to find a job because already the job market is so small. And should they be fortunate enough, should an addict or a reformed gangster be fortunate enough, Mike, to find a job and anything goes wrong, I may misplace my cell phone during lunch. I had to run out and do something and I just left my cell phone somewhere. Now I come back and I'm looking for my cell phone and I cannot remember where I put it, or I insist that I left it on the reception desk on my way out. The suspicion almost automatically shifts to that recovering addict or that reformed gangster that happens to have been fortunate enough to find a job there. And the burden of proof almost shifts to them to prove that they didn't take the phone. While Angela could be walking around looking, fitting the bill, and she's not going to be a suspect in this because she doesn't look the part. So it becomes very important as government to ensure that we don't govern in a bubble, but that we are in contact and in touch with the grassroots to ensure that the services, that there is that back and forth feedback and communication about what we are able to do, what the challenges are, and what realistically can be done.
So let's, you mentioned the socioeconomic issues. Now, the Western Cape, Cape Town specifically, seems to be the only place that is growing economically, that is creating jobs, and with it seems to be an ever-increasing migration problem of people coming to the Western Cape, especially from the Eastern Cape, right? which of course makes the process of improving those communities almost impossible. What do you plan to do about the migration crisis?
The migration crisis is not only South Africans moving from one province to another. It is also the influx of undocumented foreign nationals that we have coming into the country. And this basically poses a challenge to any government, whether it's local or provincial government, to have accurate statistics in terms of who lives in these areas. If you take the example of the Western Cape, for example, you've got huge pop-up communities. But there's also, I'm not sure if corruption, Mike, would be the correct term, so just take it with a bit of gray around the edges. You also have the issue of going into a squatter camp, for argument's sake, or going into a community of backyard dwellers and looking at the number of shacks in the context of a housing project, where you're going into this community, you're like, okay, how many shacks do you have here? And like, oh, we've got so many. So you can go shack to shack and understand, get people registered. What often happens is that due to the other socioeconomic factors, even when you have built houses, RDP houses, whatever housing projects, and you allocate people houses, these other socioeconomic factors force people towards selling those houses and going to build another shack elsewhere. So if we are not going to tackle these issues in a holistic and find sustainable solutions, the Western Cape has got a response to shacks burning down every other day because the weather in the Western Cape is on steroids. I mean, you have you feel like you're under attack because you could be cold, wet, and the wind blowing you away at the same time. So when you look at these communities, they are under constant threat of runaway fires. And the DA has a response to that. However, it does require a sustainable solution to get people into brick and mortar structures or structures that are more organized, because the Western Cape, in essence, our democracy inherited apartheid spatial planning. If you look at the flats in the Western Cape, where I grew up in Helen Court, those flats are the exact same. Whether I go to Retreat, Steenberg, Ocean View, where you can go anywhere in the Western Cape where the government houses are, and where people have what's called a rent office. Those housing units are not being properly maintained. And where housing projects are being built, Mike, they, especially for underprivileged communities, are not factoring in schools, clinics, transport, shopping centers, and just things to support a community in the planning phase. And as a result, you have people, basically, as the houses are built, people are being moved in. When I was still a councillor in the city of Johannesburg, in one of my wards, there were houses built for the residents of Diepsloot in Riverside. And as those units were becoming available, they were being stolen and sold off. The provincial and national government would then intervene, and you can go and look the city of Johannesburg, the DA coalition government at the time. We had an IFP MMC for housing, who then, between him and the DA mayor, took the provincial government to court to interdict them from moving people into those units. I'm trying to demonstrate what typically happens is that you will have these projects intercepted, and a chunk of the units will be stolen by officials who will put their relatives on those lists. Okay. You will have provincial and local government then moving people in from other regions, other provinces to come and take up units. At the time of the interdict, with the example that I'm giving, people were basically being moved in by the truckload under the cover of darkness. And in the morning, you would just wake up and find people having moved into these units. So there's a myriad challenges around these things that need to be addressed with the residents on the ground so that they take ownership of these issues. So going back to the issue of the influx of migrants, whether it's undocumented foreign nationals or whether it's people from the Eastern Cape, the importance of engaging with residents at a grassroots level is for them to understand the impact of people just coming in, because it impacts the ability for them to get housing, for the eradication of informal settlements and so on. And it doesn't help that you've got political parties saying, if you find a space of land, go and grab it. It promotes lawlessness.
Yeah, I'm just trying to work out, because there were a lot of words and a lot of examples there, and almost everyone I hear seems to head back to national government. But because we're talking, South Africa does have confusing structures. You've got departments of housing, you've got departments of water, and they may be in charge of the dam, but there may be a local authority that has to get it to your tap, right? In which case, when that water isn't at your tap, there's a very good chance that the national government has failed. I'm trying to work out why the residents of the Western Cape will be better off with another government other than the one that they currently have. Unless they are the ones busing in, I know in Gauteng, where we've almost, where we're doing this interview from, sure, the Gauteng government does all kinds of things and colludes with all kinds of people, right? Are you suggesting that's also happening in the Western Cape, that the Western Cape government under Alan Winde is also busing in illegal occupiers of new developments?
I'm not suggesting that at all. What I am saying, Mike, is that when political parties play politics, it's usually at the expense of residents. It's common knowledge that
I'm just trying to work out where the incumbent party has played politics to the detriment of the people. Do you understand what I mean? Because obviously people are going to go to the poll, and what you're selling is, the way the DA runs the Western Cape is bad, you'd be better off with us. Right? That's got to be what you're saying.
I'm saying that the residents of the Western Cape have had the DA in power for 15 years.
Yeah.
South Africa.
We've had the ANC in power for 30 years.
I'm coming to that.
Yeah.
South Africa has had the ANC in power for 30 years. As Action SA, we are saying, give us an opportunity to govern so that we may demonstrate taking services to all residents.
Yeah.
And we are not blind to the challenges that the same DA might have faced in the Western Cape. However, the DA as an Action SA government would be, is accountable. The buck stops with them at a provincial level. And the fact of the matter is that these services are not getting to the ground, there are areas in the underprivileged communities that are just fields of trash. There is an entire lake of trash in Dunoon in the Western Cape. And there are things that can be done to alleviate it slightly. As Action SA, I would be fired for going to make unrealistic promises to the residents of the Western Cape. My party expects me to be on the ground and to be in contact with the ground. The example of a Dunoon, for example, there's nothing that stops me as the government from saying that I want that lake cleaned up. There's nothing that stops us from putting pressure in terms of local service delivery to say, why is there a burst pipe in Harare? If it bursts a day or two after it has been fixed, can we please look into the root cause of that issue? Because the residents around there are mosquitoes swarming and people look like they've got eczema from mosquito bites. So I'm saying that as Action SA, we are offering a political alternative that says to the residents of the Western Cape, services aren't reaching everyone. Services aren't reaching the 80% of the community in the way that they should. And there are things that can be done, and the things that are more difficult, it becomes very important to take the voters into our confidence and say, this is what we're finding here. Here are some of the challenges, and here is how we are hoping to address it in collaboration with civil society and the residents.
So we've seen a dramatic semigration, as they call it, of people from Gauteng moving to the Western Cape. Right, we are not talking now about people arriving on taxis. We talk about people arriving in 4x4s and buying a house in the southern suburbs, right? Yeah. And the reason that has happened is, as you said, perhaps the city is run particularly well, but you're saying that that the province isn't. So now, what I'm hearing from you is a suggestion that those services have been overdone for the wealthier areas. So in other words, stop mowing the lawn in Claremont and go and clean up a lake where people throw their trash into it in an outlying area. Because you can't do both.
Please continue mowing the lawn in Claremont, but can we also ensure that that lake in Dunoon gets cleaned up?
Yeah, because I mean,
it is possible to do both.
I've spent my life in Johannesburg, and I do know that when the services roughly got switched off to the more affluent areas, right, under the same argument.
Playing politics.
Yeah, but the same argument prevailed, right, where it was like, and I've sat with your leader, who was mayor here, saying, you know, must I cut grass in Sandton or go and work in Diepsloot? And eventually that became and is kind of policy up here, right? And all that has happened has been a tremendous flight of wealth. What would stop that from happening in the Western Cape?
As the candidate in the Western Cape, I am not suggesting that we will stop delivering services.
Yeah, but you've only got sort of you've got limited resources.
You do have limited resources.
Are you saying that there's rubbish trucks that are just sitting idly, not going into those areas?
No, Mike, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that,
you're saying that
it
people
is
are
possible
stopping it.
to try and bring about a balance. You're certainly not going to come into the Western Cape and flip the switch and take the services from where they are currently getting the services to where they are not getting the services.
Well, in a way, that's kind of what I'm hearing, because all we've heard is underprivileged areas, right? And I'm saying that that's going to, let's say you flood them with services, that's got to come at a cost from somewhere. It's got to, and at very least a resource cost. So it will be a balancing of resources, let's call it nicely, right? Joburg has seen a balancing of resources, and now the streets are exploding and buildings are coming on fire because apparently, you know, that balance is a hard thing to achieve. I'm saying, in fairness to the electorate, right, what are they voting for if they change their vote to an action essay, right?
Yeah.
You know, and if somebody's listening to this from the Cape Flats, I'm sure they'd be delighted to hear that that's where the services are going to go to.
But I certainly wouldn't want somebody living in Hout Bay or Camps Bay to panic and think that, oh my goodness, she's going to come here and she's going to divert all the services. That's not what I'm looking at doing. This is why I'm saying that the reason that I am making as much reference, Mike, to the underprivileged areas is because they are the hardest hit by poverty, unemployment, and all these factors that I have listed. However, where it potentially threatens the affluent suburbs, including the, what do we call the semi-migrants?
Semigrants, yeah.
Do we call them semigrants?
Yeah.
Where it potentially threatens the suburbs and the semigrants is where those addicts and those homeless people go and set up shop around the periphery of the affluent areas, and their target market becomes your children. You may live in an affluent suburb. Money is not an issue to your child, which makes your child a prime target to a drug dealer. So addiction becomes a real threat. Those addicts that have now moved closer to these affluent suburbs because of people from the affluent suburbs having empathy and sympathy and going to give them food, it encourages them to basically set up shop there. So when you drive out of your suburb that has patrol vans and that has security, so your suburb itself is very secure. But when you've got to drive out of your suburb, you are not as safe. This is where it becomes that important that you try and bring about a balance. It cannot be and should not be a flip of the switch, because then you are not going to get the buy-in. It's important for people in affluent suburbs to understand that and this has actually been a threat that has been bandied about. You have the threat that if any other government comes into the Western Cape, that's it. It's going to look like the other areas. As Action SA, we're saying no. We want to ensure that we follow our policies in terms of stimulating the economy, getting the economy going again, attracting foreign investment, ensuring that businesses and entrepreneurs thrive, because it is the job of business to create employment. It is the function of business. It is the function of government to create a conducive environment for business to thrive, so that business creates jobs and we create an environment for entrepreneurs to thrive. It's not the job of government to create a bloated public service of useless people that are duplicating each other's jobs and creating jobs for pals. It cannot be, and that end up extorting money through the system and giving tenders to their friends and so on. It becomes very important that there are competent ethical leaders in place that are accountable and that are willing to subject themselves to lifestyle audits. Because if I'm suddenly going to roll up here in a Maserati, or I'm not into sports cars, I'm a girl, so I don't know what the equivalent would be of a boy toy. But if I'm suddenly going to roll up here, I don't know, I don't know what example to give you.
Like the ex-Speaker of Parliament.
Okay. But certainly questions need to be asked, and I need to be able to answer questions as to how am I suddenly able to afford this.
Angela, can we just sort of wrap up by saying you're hoping to make an impact into the Western Cape, right? Otherwise you wouldn't be doing this. The question that I have is, there is obviously a current division of votes based on the last election.
Yes.
Where is it that Action SA sees its growth coming from?
Action SA is actually in a rather fortunate position that we appeal to the voter that interrogates policies. We appeal to suburban voters who understand what it is that we're trying to do and do not buy into the fear-mongering. And as a candidate of mixed race, we are able, as Action SA, to appeal to the 80% of the community as well and speak the language of accountability, of what government is meant to be doing to people. I am actively encouraging residents in the Cape Flats and in Khayelitsha to attend sub-council meetings so that they understand what it is they should be expecting from their government. And when you stop keeping people in the dark, and you simply go to them with a food parcel and 200 Rand and a T-shirt, it's an insult to a voter's intelligence, because they will then remain in that shack for the next 5 years unemployed. As a government, we cannot sustain giving people houses, giving them grants for their children, and for each child you get a child care grant, you get this grant, you get that grant, and free water, free electricity, free this, free that. People actually want to work. So we need to ensure that we work with them. I find it very insulting and very demeaning that there is even this narrative, Mike, that it's the no, we must keep the DA, or we must keep the Western Cape under a DA government, because what is important is for government to understand that your function as a government at national, provincial, and local government level, it has been set up in a way that there is meant to be that collaborative working relationship. And this is where we have to keep going back to the issue of accountability. And if we are not winning with an ANC government, for argument's sake, we need to take this to the people on the ground so that they understand that in the next election, you need to understand between now and then what the government is or is not doing to enable us as a province to make this a reality. We need to be able to treat our voters with the dignity and the respect to be able to go back and help them to understand and encourage them to be active citizens and active participants in government.
Well, that would be fantastic, Angela. Let's hope you succeed in getting that message across, because that would be an enormous help. If you are sitting in the Western Cape and you think that that change of government is what you need, consider Action SA. They have, they've been on this show many times. They've got structures throughout the country, and perhaps what is needed is a change of stewardship in the Western Cape that the voters will decide on May 29th. Angela Sobey, thank you so much for joining us.
Sorry, just one more thing. About voters making an informed decision is I have requested my team to set up a series of virtual town hall meetings, because it's not possible in this remaining time to get to everybody. So I would encourage people to log into those town hall meetings and interrogate our offer as Action SA. But Mike, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And I
presume they can get those details on the website?
On X, on our website, on social media, on all the platforms.
Angela, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to everybody that watched. Please subscribe to the channel. We'll see you the next time on The State of the Nation.